So this is a few days later than I had hoped, but timing both outside of YouTube and with previously scheduled content pushed this back a little bit, but no matter. Today we're breaking down my picks for the top 10 guns and loadouts within Warzone 2, the first of the Warzone 2 era. Loadouts are a lot more valuable in this version of the game. You're not likely going to see 2 to 3 of them per game picking them up. Sometimes you're just going to have to spend $5,000 to $10,000 for weapons individually. So what's the best setups to give you the most bang for your buck or to make those strongholds worthwhile? Today we're breaking down my choices here for that, but what's nice about these is that while I think that these are absolutely going to perform great for you, there's still other weapons that if you pick these up and you're like, yeah, I don't really quite like these, you can still absolutely pick up other weapons and do well. There's still no real defined air quote meta in Warzone 2 just yet, and for that, I think it's nice. As we go along, drop your thoughts below. What are you liking the most out of Warzone 2 weaponry wise? Is there anything in particular that stands out to you that's proven pretty powerful? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts below. But if you enjoyed the video, you found it insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to stay updated with all things Warzone 2, Modern Warfare 2, and anything COD related. We're on the road to 600,000 subscribers. If you're part of that 70% of viewers who are not subscribed, I'd love to have you in the community. And finally, check out my friends over at GamerAdvantage who have some incredible holiday deals going on in the next couple of days, but more on them in a bit. For now, let's take a look at the weaponry that you should be using in Warzone 2. First, I want to start out with your medium to long range here. Stuff that within Al Mazrah, I think will be your most used subset of weaponry. Stuff that, again, you have so much open space sometimes. You will be going into buildings. Sure, you want to clear that out with CQC, but at the same time, medium to long range is probably where you're going to take a lot of your engagements. Now, statistically, there may be better, but for now, I want to start out with my definitive favorite weapon to use in Warzone 2 so far. That's the TAC-56. It's got lowish recoil. All the weaponry this year, as opposed to Warzone 1, has some. We don't have any gun that's like the NZ41, Bar, or Bren from last year, where they're literally laser pointers with 0 recoil whatsoever. But for comparison to others, the TAC-56 is very easy to control in terms of those recoil properties. For this, I'd recommend 5 attachments here with this. Firstly, your optic of the VLK 4x. That's going to be one of the standard ones we see here across the board. That's probably one of my preferred medium to long range scopes. If I'm not using something like a sniper, it seems like it's a nice balance between giving you that zoom in on the optic, but also not punching in too much where you can't see what's around you still. So I like the VLK 4x. Then I'll end up running the Tundra Pro barrel. The TAC-56 for some reason right now only has 2 barrel options, and of course you want something that will give you a bit more damage range as well as bullet velocity, so it's a no-brainer for the Tundra Pro. Then I'll end up using a couple of different suppressors I've been going back and forth between. Now, right now, before we test any of these out to break them down in particular, it's one of those things where you kind of want to go for what offers you the most and sacrifices the least. For that, I'd recommend the Echoless 80 or the Harbinger D20 suppressors. These both offering up sound suppression, bullet velocity, damage range, and recoil smoothness, while only sacrificing a little bit in terms of that snappy nature of ADS, aiming stability, and aim walking speed. Now, again, there seems to be very minimal difference in terms of what is sacrificed versus what is gained here with this, so go back and forth between the two, try them out in firing range, and see which one feels best to you. I'll also run the high velocity ammunition to give more bullet velocity, though oppositely, it's strange because it says that we do lose a little bit in damage range, though from preliminary testing, it doesn't seem to be too much to be like a hindrance to not run it, so that's something that I'd still consider. And then I would run the 60 round magazine just because I love my ammo. I love being able to take out 2 to 3 enemies on a team before having to reload. You might be able to wipe a squad before ever having to reload here with this, so it's definitely nice to have. Now, one thing to consider with this year and Warzone 2, and we'll come back to this with every single weapon we talk about, is weapon tuning. This is the first time we have the ability to take weapons a step further than just their base attributes that we can tweak. Just to go across the board, I will usually end up tuning things in favor of additional flinch resistance for better recoil control across steadiness and smoothness, as well as things like damage range and bullet velocity. So for this, we tune the VLK 4x optic all the way for flinch resistance, the Tundra Pro barrel for recoil steadiness and damage range, maxing those both out vertically and horizontally. The suppressor will end up tuning for recoil smoothness as well as bullet velocity. The high velocity ammunition, we end up pushing for damage range and bullet velocity. So just know that we will tweak these things accordingly like that. But beyond that, we also have the HCR as the next weapon that I would recommend. The HCR kind of surprised me, to be honest with you. We kind of have a little bit of a LMG meta kind of coming to a head. Again, there's really no defined clear meta right now, but I love this thing. It was a lot of fun to play around with. So for that build, I'd recommend the 4x optic again. I was running the F-Tac Hornet 20-inch barrel. I kind of want to play around with and test a little bit about the Bruin 686mm barrel with the built-in suppressor, but we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. Preliminarily though, the Hornet 20-inch barrel is not bad whatsoever. Then again, the Echoless or the Harbinger D20 suppressor, the high velocity ammunition, and then I'll run a grip here on this because we don't have anything that offers a little bit more control in terms of the stock. The comb adds a bit more recoil steadiness, but not quite control. So for this, I run the Stip 40 grip for control, and then I'll tune things, of course, for recoil steadiness. On that rear grip, I'll end up maxing out the damage range as well as the bullet velocity on the high velocity ammunition, max out the recoil smoothness and bullet velocity on the suppressor, max out the steadiness and damage range on the barrel, and then of course the flinch resistance on the optic. Keeping in line with the LMGs a little further, the RPK is another weapon that absolutely is a melt machine. What's nice is that there are a couple of different variations of the RPK as ground loot, so even if you don't have your loadout, some of the base builds here of this are rather easy to control and you can do well with no matter what. So if you want to pick up an SMG in place of a rifle or something like that, or an LMG from the buy station, you can. But if you end up getting your loadout, you have your preferred weapon of choice here in regards to the RPK, I would end up recommending the VLK 4x optic, the TAC 597 barrel, the Polarfire S suppressor, that's essentially your echo list that we talked about from the last two weapons. I'll run the Lock Grip Precision 40 underbarrel and the 7.62 high velocity rounds. Now these are again kind of showing a little bit of a pattern here in terms of these builds, but realistically some of these are the best choice that don't offer too much competition in regards to other attachments. Like the TAC 597 barrel, that's the only one that's going to give you damage range and bullet velocity. The other two are really kitted for more so mobility. And then with 75 rounds at base on the magazine that's by default, you really can't go wrong. You can just skip over that magazine again and kind of prioritize a different attachment elsewhere. Now as for tuning, of course, we'll end up putting the high velocity rounds all the way up for damage range as well as all the way over for bullet velocity. The grip, if you actually want to end up tuning this for ADS speed, you can, because it doesn't offer too much in terms of overall recoil control. It's more so tuned towards hip control at its base, so you can go for a little bit more ADS there. Recoil smoothness and bullet velocity on the muzzle though, tune that all the way up, and recoil steadiness as well as damage range on the barrel. The VLK 4x optic, tune that for flinch resistance all the way up. Then coming back down to some other additional rifles, we're going to talk about the Kastov 7.62, what would be comparable to your AK-47 normally. This is one that honestly is a lot of fun to use as well. It has a bit more kick, I think, at times than the TAC 56, but it feels pretty lightweight in regards to movement as opposed to the RPK and HCR, but still you can absolutely get around the map with relative ease. For this, I'd run the 4x optic, no brainer there at that one, the 584mm barrel, 4 extra damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil control as opposed to the 406mm barrel that just offers recoil control as well as bullet velocity, or the K30 406mm, which only offers recoil control and bullet velocity. So you get a bit more out of it here in terms of benefits. Then I'll run the Polarfire S muzzle and the 40-round magazine, but instead of the ammunition this time around, I actually opt for the RPK stock just to give a bit more control and stability in regards to that aiming and firing. Now tuning once again, we'll end up putting the muzzle all the way up for smoothness and all the way over for bullet velocity, the barrel all the way up for recoil steadiness and all the way over for damage range, and the optic all the way up for flinch resistance. And finally, for our medium to long range is the EBR 14, which honestly, statistically speaking, it's very good, but I'm putting this number 5 of 5 at our long range just because for me personally, it was very hit or miss. If you hit your headshots, it was lethal. But at range, it's something that if you hit body shots, you're just going to be tagging armor. It'll take about 3 to 4 shots, and with the recenter speed, if you don't want to be off target entirely, you just kind of tap, 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 and it's just not something that will be the best in terms of that rate of fire, and as a result might take a bit more time to kill than you may hope for. For this, I'd run the 4x optic, the Boremaster barrel, opting for that over the T300 barrel since we don't have as much cons as that, and we don't really need the hip recoil control that that would afford, so the Boremaster is totally fine. The Polarfire S muzzle, the Demo Clean Shot underbarrel for aiming idle stability and recoil stabilization, and then the 15-round magazine, just because 10, you'll be reloading quite a bit here if you don't use that. And 20, I think you'll lose a bit too much in mobility and ADS speed, so it's a nice middle ground between that. Now, before we jump on over into the close range engagements and the weapons you'll want to use here at this, I want to take a quick second to let you know about my friends over at GamerAdvantage. I've talked about them for a long time now if you've been on the channel. I live and die by these guys. As a creator who's at my desk looking at my monitor for 10 plus hours a day, eye fatigue and strain and the effects of blue light are absolutely something that I have had to deal with for years now, and I've probably tried every pair you could find on Amazon for blue light glasses, but none of them come even close to how much GamerAdvantage has helped. The most comfortable, lightweight, and durable frames on the market. Their lenses are clinically proven, and they can absolutely help you out too in your daily productivity. If you're working at a monitor, gaming a ton, or just even looking at your phone for prolonged periods of time a day, these are absolutely for you. This week, they're kicking off some incredible deals for the holidays, so keep your eyes peeled. We'll have a few more shout outs to come, so make sure you check them out. But if you're at all interested, head on over to the link in the description below. And if you're looking to pick something up, use code Espresso for 10% off normally, but throughout the week, they'll have a couple of site-wide sales going on where codes do stack, and upwards of, even at some points, 50% off through the coming days. So we'll keep you posted with everything when those sales go live, but make sure to check them out, link in the description below. Now, jumping over to the close range here, we're going to start out with one that isn't quite an SMG, but man, it is great if you have a ton of ammo on person if you want a dual rifle. And the nice part about the backpack system within Warzone 2 is that you can absolutely hold more ammunition of one kind than others if you're not using it. So you can end up having 200, 400, 500 rounds of AR ammunition if you wanted it. So that if you really want to, you truly can dual rifle and not really be hindered too much. This, though, is the AK-74U, or rather the Kastov 74U. Now, this at range, it's not as great as the other weapons that we just talked about, but in terms of close range, it is going to shred. And honestly, I'd be curious to see the testing on the statistics, because I might go so far as to say that it might be one of your best statistically close quarters performing weapons. For this, I'll end up running the short tack 300mm barrel, which gives increased bullet velocity and recoil control. You don't want to sacrifice too much of that control or range on it by opting in for the Ultra or the BR-209 barrel that prioritizes movement. You want the echoless 80 suppressor, high velocity ammunition, a 45 round magazine, and I like to end up going with the R7 stock so far, which gives me a bit more ADS speed and sprint speed, so it allows me to end up zooming around the map a little bit further, but also packing that rifle punch but up close, making it a lot more maneuverable. So in close quarters, you're going to win a lot of these engagements, and for that, highly recommend you check this out. Now, as for tuning, because we are playing towards more close quarter stuff, you can end up opting for more ADS speed and things like that, though I would try and balance it out so that you do have the ability to have some damage range as opposed to ADS speed, if that's something that, like the barrels, you can tune one way or the other. So for the barrel, I'd still go recoil steadiness and damage range. I'd still go recoil smoothness as well as bullet velocity on the muzzle. I'd still go damage range and bullet velocity on the ammunition, but when you get to things like the stock, I'd end up prioritizing a little bit of that ADS speed so that you get a little bit more benefit there with it. Beyond the 74U, I'd end up going with the Lachmann sub, one that has truly proved to be very worthwhile time and time again in my games here at this. I'd end up running this in terms of attachments for a bit more mobile playstyle, but at the same time, tuning it for a bit more damage range and recoil steadiness, so you kind of get the best of both worlds. For this, I'd run the VLK 7mm laser, that giving more ADS speed, aiming stability, and sprint to fire speed. I'd run the FTAC sub 12-inch barrel for bullet velocity, damage range, hip fire accuracy, and recoil control. The X10 BR40 suppressor, that again being your echoless and your standard suppressor that you'd want to run, but in the SMG category. The 50 round magazine is definitely what I would recommend. It does take a few rounds to down and eliminate a player, so to be able to do that 2 to 3 times before having to reload would be great. And then I'll end up running these stockless mods that I have a maxed out ADS speed, sprint to fire speed, movement speed, and hip recoil control. Now that, unfortunately, you can't tune that as a result because obviously you don't have a stock, but for the rest, I'd end up tuning the recoil steadiness and damage range, maxing that out on the barrel. Same thing with the smoothness and bullet velocity on the magazine. Both of those performing incredibly well. Now, the next SMG I'd recommend for close quarters is the Fennec 45. Now, we talked about this before Warzone 2 launched, where unfortunately we still only have 45 rounds, but honestly, you can make that very worthwhile and take out 2 to 3 players before having to reload at any point. For this, I'd run the 7mm laser once again. I'd run the covert force barrel, that gives you sound suppression, damage range, hip fire accuracy, and bullet velocity. That, of course, you don't need a muzzle, so you can end up taking another attachment here with this. Then I'd opt for the Merc foregrip, the 45 round magazine, and the Fennec rubber grip for a bit more sprint to fire and ADS speed, while the Merc foregrip counteracts and gives a little bit more control in that aspect of recoil steadiness and hip recoil control. So for tuning, you'll want to, of course, tune the steadiness and damage range of the barrel all the way up. Because the Merc foregrip is a little bit more tailored towards those hip properties, I'd end up shaving some length off that and going towards the ADS speed on the tuning with it. And then realistically, the rubber grip can go either way. If you want a bit more recoil steadiness, you can tune towards that, or you can go with the ADS and sprint to fire speed up to you really at that point. We got two more weapons to talk about here. The next one is the Vaznev 9K. The Vaznev's interesting because it's very easy to control, but it doesn't have a lot of ammo. So this is going to be one that I wouldn't say to challenge even close to mid-range, but have it be a weapon that you exclusively use for clearing buildings and things like that. So for this, I'd recommend the Response 3-barrel just so that you can challenge as much as possible if there is somebody at a little bit further of a distance. I'd take that X10 RR40 suppressor. I'd take the 45 round magazine just because otherwise you don't have much ammo to work with. Then I'd end up taking the True Tac grip, which gives you more sprint to fire and ADS speed, making it snappier in close quarters engagements. And then I'd take the R7 stock, again offering a bit more ADS speed and sprint speed so you can zoom around the map a little further. Now tuning wise, again, you're going to want to end up for close quarters, kind of tune this out for a bit more ADS speed rather than anything else. So aim down sight on the stock, tune that, sprint to fire and aim down sight speed on the rear grip. But then you can kind of make up for that by tuning the muzzle and the barrel a little bit more for that damage range and recoil steadiness, as well as bullet velocity. So you kind of get a mix here that's pretty nice with that, but that's going to round out our primaries. I want to round out this video with builds talking about some pistols, surprisingly. Now, right now within Warzone 2, you cannot end up creating your own custom perk package. And honestly, the perk packages kind of seem to be bugged. They're not giving you the full effects of every single perk, which is definitely something that's going to be ironed out and really needs to be ironed out quickly. But for the time being, it's not really worth it to take the perk package with overkill to end up getting your rifle and say SMG or something like that. So instead, I'd buy another weapon after I get my loadout, or vice versa. I'd end up buying the first weapon that I want and then getting the perks of the secondary weapon and then just going from there, picking up the weapon in place of the pistols. But if you only have the option to have your loadout, take the X13 Auto. It is, in my mind, the best pistols you can end up having as a secondary, as a sidearm. For this, I'd end up running the pistol laser 1 milliwatt, the Sidewinder 6-slide barrel, the Forge DX90F suppressor, the 33 round magazine, and finally akimbo as the rear grip. Take two of them so you can end up absolutely just shredding through enemies in close quarters. Tuning wise on the barrel, you can end up taking recoil steadiness and damage range all the way without any sort of really second thought on it, because you're not aiming down sight, so you don't need the aim walking speed or ADS speed. Same thing with the recoil smoothness and bullet velocity. You're not aiming down sight, so you're not losing out on anything there with that. So make sure you tune those accordingly, giving you as best a chance as possible. But that's your top 10 weapons that I would recommend here and the builds to go along with them. But right now, one thing that you might notice is we didn't talk about any snipers. At this very moment, I don't know that I'd do much sniping. Until they offer the ability to one-shot headshot with full armor, it just doesn't seem really worth it. You'll give away your position, and oftentimes maybe they'll return fire enough to either make you have to run away and refill your armor plates or hit your stim shot, or they could end up taking you out entirely. If you can team shot, sure, go for it, but right now, I just don't think that it's really all that worth to snipe. Now, beyond that, the other things to round out our loadouts here are, of course, your tacticals, lethals, and your perk packages. For this, I kind of go across the board. I use stuns as my tacticals. Lethals, I'll use a drill charge. Honestly, I really like the drill charges. It really helps with combating campers. I think that the one engagement that we recently took, me and my squad, there was like 4 people stacked up in one house. I ended up killing 2 of them with 2 drill charges just because it was that easy, and they really weren't even aware of it. And finally, the perk package that I almost exclusively adhere to is the Vanguard perk package, offering up double time, bomb squad, resupply, and high alert. Though again, the perks, they don't work entirely as they should. High alert, I have not gotten a ping on high alert since Warzone 2 launched, but I like double time, bomb squad, and resupply enough that I definitely think that it's still worth it. Sometimes I'll get a random ultimate perk that just doesn't make sense. Like I got quick fix in that perk package at one point a couple of days ago where it was giving me the effects of it. I was killing enemies and getting my health resupplied immediately, but I still have yet to get the high alert pings. So we'll see what happens with all of that, but that is the top 10 best loadouts that you should be running here within Season 1. If you've made it this far, truly thank you so much. You're an absolute legend. This is run way longer than other videos up on the channel, in some part due to the fact that, of course, we had to explain some new mechanics and features here within this, like tuning, the perk packages and stuff like that, but at the same time, there's just a lot more to learn and go in depth with this year. So we'll try and streamline things a little further for future videos, but for now, check these out and let me know your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Modern Warfare 2, Warzone 2, and anything COD related. We'll keep you up to date with absolutely all of it. So for now, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.